The casting of Frank Stone finally released last week. Being the first supermassive game in nearly 2 years and also in collaboration with Dead by Daylight, this entire release was extremely exciting and one of my most anticipated games of 2024. After having avoided majority of spoilers and other content, I went into this full blind playthrough with a very open mind, excited for what's ahead, and I'm honestly kind of underwhelmed, if not even disappointed. Which is why I'm finally doing another review video, something I haven't done since, ironically, The Devil in Me. I should really do videos like this for some of the other games I've played through on this channel, maybe even those I've finished long beforehand. But for today, we're focusing on this Dead by Daylight multiverse time travel extravaganza that, as you can tell by the title and thumbnail, left me more unhappy than satisfied. For The Devil in Me, there were 6 things I enjoyed and 4 I did not, well, this time around it's 5 things I enjoyed, but also 10 things I did not. 10! That's twice as much. Back then I went back and forth with positive and negative points. This time I'll first mention all the things I enjoyed, and then the second half of the video is the full Frank Stone roast. So without further ado, let's review. If there's one aspect with which Supermassive Games always delivers, it's the characters. Sometimes they're great, sometimes bland but good, sometimes just okay, but sometimes also amazing and one of the best parts about their respective games. And this is no different to the casting of Frank Stone, which delivers some great playable and supportive characters, ranged from just okay, to bland but good, to great and even amazing. I won't go into too much detail just yet, as I will be making a separate ranking video for all the characters in the upcoming week, so tune in for that if you want my detailed thoughts on the characters. Nonetheless, we have a great cast and crew to follow along, and they were definitely one of the best parts about the game. Just like the characters, one thing you can always count on in Supermassive Games are the deaths. Each and every game delivers some memorable, brutal deaths, and the casting of Frank Stone does no different. From Stan getting crushed, Linda's decapitation, and most notably Chris getting turned inside out, we have a lot of highlight deaths once more, and they're without a doubt one of the best parts of this game. And responsible for a lot of them is Frank Stone. While technically Augustine and the Entity are the higher evil, Frank Stone is the one that does majority of the killing, quite comparable to the Met, yet also feeling monsters in his second version. I've seen so many people say that it would be upset if Frank Stone, also called the Champion, wouldn't be coming to DBD, and I absolutely agree. The original look with just the mask is quite bland, but once he emerges in his full form in the final chapter, he's genuinely fucking awesome. Brutal, ice cold, great design, without a doubt the highlight, and something you can hopefully soon see in Dead by Daylight. Mentioning DBD, obviously the implementation of the DBD elements were really fun and made for a lot of fun figure point moments. From the collectibles to the chains you can find and repair to the QTEs being replaced with skill checks, the DBD aspects were well implemented and never felt oppressive or too over the top. A little bit on the nose? Sure, but still a part that absolutely delivered some of the best and most enjoyable moments in the game. Yet the highlight of the casting of Frank Stone is without a doubt its final chapter. Now, I will say that the set piece and the manor itself isn't that insane, but chapter 14 is the huge culmination of hours of gameplay and many choices made within. The branches for this chapter alone are mental. So many little choices that can lead to a completely new outcome in the end, to the point where it's absurd and probably the most comparable to the Just Become Human and insight to the rest of the series. And while the ending left me somewhat confused during my playthrough, the fact that if your characters survive, they will just end up in an eternal loop at the campfire going through trial over trial for the rest of time is both really depressing but also fucking awesome. Ultimately, the final chapter does a lot of things right and is undoubtedly the best part of the casting of Frank Stone. But now, we get to why all of that can't salvage the other problems I've had, and how a great final chapter and technically great ending can fix the other issues beforehand. Let's buckle up and go through the things I did not enjoy about the casting of Frank Stone. Let's kick things off with something rather quick that isn't that big of a deal, but honestly also is. Where the fuck were the premonitions? One of the most fun elements of any Supermassive game was getting a glimpse into a potential future that could occur depending on your choices. And unto dawn we had the totems, in the Quarry the tarot cards, and in the Dark Witches anthology we had the photos. Why don't we have something like that in this game? What's the deal? It's like removing shinies in Pokemon. You don't need them, but you sure as hell want to find them. I might even make a video coming up with some of my own. We'll see, but that is a minor start. Let's move on to some massive issues. If you've watched my playthrough, then you will know that there were dozens of moments in which I had to complain about the technical aspects of this game. From low FPS to weird graphical bugs to very clunky and soggy character movement, there were points in the game that felt genuinely bad and not enjoyable, and they're not because of the story necessarily, but because of the technical experience. There were so many walking sections where you want to explore, but the exploring feels awful because your character moves like a wet brick, gets stuck every few steps, all while the FPS are going up and down and there's weird things happening with the models. I know some people didn't have these issues, some had it even worse than me. I would ultimately consider this probably the worst optimized supermassive game to date, which given behavior's involvement in the history of DBD probably shouldn't be all that shocking. Similarly, if you've watched my playthrough, you will know that there were several sections that were simply boring and to some degree dreadful to play. Chapter 5 is over an hour long and the majority is spent walking around, doing unnecessary puzzles and wasting time having to climb and squeeze yourself around to the point where it just feels lame and annoying, and there's several sections like this throughout the game. Don't get me wrong, Supermassive Games has always been a mix of cinematic cutscenes with choices of quick time events and the free movement explorational part, but literally all other games simply do the latter much better. It's like we literally downgraded one of the most important aspects of this franchise by adding an unnecessary amount of extra moving around and puzzles to complete, which especially in hindsight to the mentioned bad performance genuinely hurt the experience of my playthrough. Like, when the movement of the characters is this clunky and awful, then holy moly does it feel unfun to move around and explore, and given that this is such a key element, it becomes a super massive problem. Again, I love exploring and finding collectibles, but not when doing so feels like a chore. Especially chapter 9 with Linda down at the cellar was awful. Like, why do I need to fix these boulders right now? What's the point? It's boring and annoying. And there's several moments like this. Why do I need to fix some random platform to get to this collectible? Just let me pick it up and move on. Why waste my time with boring puzzles? It ain't even puzzles, it's just grabbing one item to activate something so you can get what you want, which again, especially with the awful movement, just feels bad. As a matter of fact, this is one of the reasons I would not want to replay this game from start to finish. Those sections are just genuinely not fun to play. And this brings me to another reason as to why replaying this game from start to finish would suck, and is probably also the reason I've yet to replay any TPA game. How do we still not have a skip option? I genuinely do not understand it. Don't get me wrong, that first full-blind playthrough experience is special. I love it and I value the cinematic cutscenes, but once you finish the game, then holy shit, let me skip cutscenes I've seen before. I replayed the final chapter a few times and had to watch that same Augustine cutscene 3 times. It's boring. Just let me skip to the next gameplay section or choice. It just feels like a waste of time. If I've seen something before, I don't need to watch it again. If I want to get the achievements, I don't want to spend hours just sitting there rewatching cutscenes I've already watched. Again, I love these games on first playthrough, but a second playthrough bores me to death. Once you know everything, it's just not fun to sit there having to sit through hours of old cutscenes when all you want to do is watch new cutscenes and find new branches and experience new moments. But I'd rather catch those in a convenient YouTube video than spend hours unlocking it in-game. I know this may seem over the top, but I have dozens of games I want to play and I just don't want to waste my time with something that could be so easily avoided with such a simple feature. I know, some people can replay these games 10 times without getting bored, but I can't. Sorry. This kind of brings me back to my earlier point about the gameplay, because where were the fun chases? It felt like I had to hit 5 quick-time events all game long. Outside of the final chapter, there's barely any chases or moments that require you to hit any QTEs, even though that's like one of the integral parts of any supermassive games. Like, you had all these long exploration sections, but like back to back to back, with no exciting high points in between. After that cool face-up with Frank Stone in the first chapter, the next notable chase or somewhat exciting section is in chapter 7. Chapter 7! And even here, it's not even really a chase, it's actually just another puzzle, in this case repairing the gen, while occasionally having to film Frank Stone with a camera. And that entire mechanic got old super quick, and later during chapter 13 felt actually silly and cheesy. Like, you got Sam trying to save the kids and it's supposed to feel stressful like a huge showdown, you're just standing there filming him with a camera and occasionally rewinding the film. What happened to shooting Wendigos and werewolves with shotguns? Chapter 14 is like the only point in the entire game that had a chase sequence comparable to previous games, and let's not act like dodging some of Frank's attacks with Madison and Sam was anything special. Again, just compare this to chases from Until Dawn, House of Ashes, or The Quarry. It's literally incomparable, and another huge reason why this game just didn't satisfy me whatsoever. This also kind of brings me back to my earlier point about the gameplay, because one thing that makes such game design in a horror game even more boring is when the atmosphere just isn't delivering. I've mentioned before how watching others play Until Dawn was scarier and more unsettling than playing some of other horror games. And this is the same case with the casting of Frank Stone. All of those slow and boring gameplay sections could have been better if the atmosphere was at least somewhat scary, but outside of the sound design during the part where Linda finds all the movie pieces, this game was never scary whatsoever. Chapter 5 and Chapter 9 that are basically just moving around, they could have felt so much better if the atmosphere was actually somewhat scary or unsettling, but that just wasn't the case. There was no tension, no stress, just whatever. Chapter 7 did it somewhat good. Linda had to repair the gin, Frank Stone was looking around, you're actually under some pressure, cool. I actually felt some tension. But that's like literally it. And again, it was a little bit intense, but still not scary at all. I mean, even the Quarry was scarier, and that should tell you a lot. And all of these points play a role when it comes to the pacing, because as I've made it clear in several ways, this game ended up being pretty damn boring. The characters and story kept me invested and just made me thinking there's gotta be something happening soon, but the pacing of this game was just slow, uneventful, and like mentioned, boring. Chapter 1 starts great. Good mix of atmosphere, intrigue, fun fight section, nothing to complain. Chapter 2, 3 and 4 are all focused on introducing the characters, building up the world we're in, some story aspects, okay. Chapter 5 was like mentioned an over 1 hour long snooze fest with awful gameplay made bearable by the characters. The chapter ended on a high note with the Chris choice, and what then? Chapter 6 is another walking simulator with collectibles. Chapter 7 is the, as mentioned, first time since Chapter 1 that we have somewhat of a chase sequence and tension before we then go back to what we did the previous 5 chapters. Everything that happens between Chapter 8 and Chapter 12 is walking around, exploring, throwing in more stuff into the story part, with the only somewhat notable event being Chris arriving in the future and sending her back. Or not. Don't get me wrong, we have some little choices to make here and there, and yes, people can even die, but like, you know, and I thought about giving this its own talking point, but I'ma just mention it here real quick. What the fuck is wrong with the imbalance in chapter length? Chapter 10 and 11 are like 5 minutes long each? What? Remember, I originally thought about making one video per chapter. Imagine how stupid that would have looked. Anyways, chapter 13 and 14 are after the very first chapter and the halftime chapter the only chapters where something somewhat exciting happens. What the fuck? 10 or 14 chapters are build up, exploring, walking. Hello? Like, I've seen people call this game their favorite supermassive game to date, some call it the best supermassive game to date, and I honestly just don't get it. Like, the more I look back at my playthrough and the events of Frank Stone, I am genuinely wondering if we played through the same game. Like, please compare this pacing with the Quarry as example. After the prologue, chapter 1 and 2 are all about character building and setting up the story and setting, so far so good. Chapter 3 is immediately exciting, full of action, chase sequences, and even potential deaths. Same for chapter 4, same for chapter 5, same for chapter 6. Chapter 7 is the exception, and it's a very long, slow, and more dialogue-focused story catch-up that is also very boring on replays, but what after that? Chapter 8, 9 and 10, all of which are filled with amazing moments, action, high tension, and so much cool shit going on. And the same can be said for any other supermassive game, but not for the casting of Frank Stone. Like mentioned, with the previous point about the chases, it's as if we're missing half the game here. It's like we forgot that it's the combination of story plus exploring and memorable moments plus chases that made Until Dawn, The Quarry, and the Dark Pages anthology so great. This game is long, but up until the final hour, basically nothing happens. Again, the characters are fun and enjoyable, and the story intriguing, but all of that gets drowned out by the fact that it's a video game. Casting of Frank Stone is just slow and boring, and the pacing is a perfect example of that. Yeah, I'm going to give this part its own slot because I believe it's just really bad. If you've seen my playthrough, you know that everyone died in 2024. Main reason for that being that I did not know that you need to sacrifice Stan at a very specific point to have everyone else survive. Yes, need to. And that sucks. As I've explained it in my chapter 14 replays, no player with the intention of trying to keep everyone alive would let Stan get killed at that moment. And the moment you do that, another character will die, no matter what. That's just untypical writing. Like, we've had characters that always die before, but never that said characters needs to die at that specific point to ensure everyone else's survival. That's in my opinion a genuinely really flawed writing decision. Why is the player getting punished for wanting to save everyone? Yes, Stan is an asshole, but does it mean I am supposed to just let him die? What kind of message is that supposed to send? I've made it clear by now that chapter 14 is the highlight of the game. The reason for that is that there's various different ways this chapter can play out and being affected by choices made back in chapter 2 and after, and like 90% of all deaths take place here. The problem is that this is like the only part of the game where it felt like your decisions and how things played out truly mattered. What choices truly matter and become noticeable before those final 20 minutes? Only notable choices in general are Jaime trying to up Chris in chapter 5 and Chris staying in 2024 or being sent to 1980. Though even those two choices feel like they don't really matter that much. Like if Jaime survives that encounter, then what? What does he do for the rest of the game? It's very similar to how in other games, once a character's first potential fatal moment is survived, the game barely does anything with them afterwards, just with the difference that those games have other qualities and character branches that balance that out to some degree, like we see and hear him for maybe another 5 minutes if he survives chapter 5. That is both a problem in his character writing, but also just makes his entire choice and butterfly effect in retrospective seem pretty unimportant and other than the fact that he survives or not. And Chris, if she gets sent back to 1980, she either dies or survives. She doesn't really do much anymore. Now, if she stays in 2024, things can become interesting, but once again, not until the final chapter. Like, sure, she's around for a few minutes before that now, but how much of a difference does it really make? Again, this is what I mean with smoke and mirrors. Everything you do up until the final chapter just feels irrelevant. There's like no proper butterfly effects taking place before the finale, other than maybe Stan dying, which would mean another character 100% dies in chapter 14. This is also a thing. What does any character dying early really change? Things play out the way they do nonetheless. Chapter 14 and chapter 14 will take place. Both timelines always reach their fate. And yes, this is a valid critique point for other titles as well, but not to this degree. Compare this to how in the Quarry, Jacob or Emma dying or surviving or getting infected early can affect so much going forward, or Dylan getting infected or not at the radio hut. In House of Ashes, Rachel Larry dying early eliminates so much content before the finale even happens, even if the finale technically plays out the same. And of Medina and the Devil May have it similar, where early deaths actually take away content. Can you really say the same about Jaime, Chris or Madison dying early? The game moves on without them the same way it would before, and again, this isn't the first time this happens. Until Dawn is infamous same issue with Jessica and Matt, but even here they at least have that extra part in chapter 10 that would be totally gone if none of them made it. And again, yes, there's various little differences in the first half of the game, but those are, once again, more cosmetic, nothing really important. Smoke and mirrors. It's small little changes that can be pointed out during replays, but not something that actually feels like it matters. And like mentioned, yes, chapter 14 goes crazy with the branching, from hypnotizing or shooting people to different chase scenes to escaping into another timeline, various little choices coming into play that alter how this final chapter plays out. That is cool and all, but once again, like the only time it happens. And even here you could consider it more smoke and mirrors, as ultimately the characters will either die, make it to the campfire, or escape into another reality. It's just that we do it in various different ways that can only be achieved by various different choices that will never matter unless you go this very specific route. It's cosmetics, it's choices and outcomes for replays of the end, not the actual game. I think you get what I mean at this point. In comparison to previous games, it just feels like the already very few choices I make throughout the game just don't have any impact until the very end of it, where even here, they don't even matter or come into play unless very specific things are being done to even remember you made them in the first place. It's as if the entire game and its choices were written around having a very flexible and multi-branched final chapter to the point where anything you do before it just feels irrelevant. Add the fact that early deaths barely change anything and that the only notable different branch before chapter 14 is Chris staying going back in time, it just feels that this game, that is supposed to be all about its choices changing the experience, just never really does exactly that. And again, previous titles have similar problems, but not only not to this degree, but also have other qualities to balance that out. And that just isn't the case here in my opinion, and the last part should probably wrap that point up even more. As I finished the game, I was left yelling, "That's it." I sat there confused and uncertain what to think of the game, both due to the various issues I've talked about by now, but even more so the fact that the story is all over the place and lacks any compelling conclusion and resolvement. Don't get me wrong, is the ending with the campfire cool? Fuck yeah. Is the idea of us seeing our characters entering the eternal suffering of the entity as we know it from Dead by Daylight a great final imagery point to end on? Sure. But there were so many unanswered questions to that point where I asked if that is it, because it felt like we ended this game way too soon, or that we introduced way too much without actually resolving it before we reached that point. This entire game just feels messy with its plot and lore points to the point where you kind of understand what's going on, but also not really. We start in 1963 with the death of Frank Stone, whose spirit later on becomes revived due to being filmed by a cursed camera sold by some time-traveling cult member of the Entity. Jump back and forth between 1980 and 2024, which are different timelines of the same characters. Later introduce a time-traveling device with which you can go from one timeline to another, all while the kids from 1980 are filming a movie that we then end up watching in 2024, which unleashes Frank Stone and was trapped in it with then starts the Entity's eternal cycle. These are like the core plot points, and not only does it all sound batshit insane, it also never really gets properly explained in the first place, and then also not properly resolved. Why do these timelines exist? Who the fuck built a horologium? How does it work? How does the time travel work? All of these questions go back to the Entity, the evil that we all know from DBD. Why do we not actually give the Entity more fleshed out lore by actually answering these questions that will make all the lore we know from DBD much more understandable as well? It's like we throw in so much crazy, outwardly non-rational plot points that we as players are just supposed to go along with before we then end the game without properly concluding all of those things. In some way it leaves the player with a room of interpretation. On the other hand, it just feels like lazy writing. We introduce and tackle lore and plot points that build the entire story of the game, yet end the story and game before actually resolving said lore and plot points. It's unsatisfying. You can't give supernatural plot points and just half-ass it. Antedon's backstory and lore is so well told and explained throughout the game. From the mountain, the Wendigo spirit, how the mine accident played into it all and more. Management then takes a simple but understandable approach with the toxic gas causing hallucinations. The Lobe does a simple yet amazing twist that explains all the crazy shit going on. House of Ashes got super deep low with its monster that leaves room for more yet feels understandable, and the Devil in Me leaves no questions whatsoever. The Quarry honestly could have done better with the curse, but even here you finish the game and can resolve the story in a satisfying and understandable way. Even if you have some DBD knowledge, this game just throws around with so many different ideas and lore points where it gets messy. We start with that first chapter, which is a good beginning. Then we go into 2 different years and constantly switch back and forth. While doing so, we constantly throw in new elements, including that one character goes from 1980 into 2024 because of the mentioned horologium time travel device. So what is that? Why do our characters just move on from that? Why does this suddenly happen? Who made this? Even Linda told Sam to fuck off because he didn't want to explain what the fuck is going on. Different timelines, time travel, various questions piling up, and then boom, we end the game. We just end it with a sick ending, but an ending that doesn't answer anything. This entire game and story is written in a way where it feels like there's just so much content missing, as if we have another The Quarry situation, where the story couldn't be as fleshed out as originally intended, yet The Quarry still managed for everything to make sense, mostly due to the fact that we kept it simple yet intriguing. Casting of Frank Stone bites more than it could chew. It picks up several meat from the buffet, only half eats the steak and fish, and then just skips straight to the dessert. We throw in so many cool ideas and plot points that in theory should make for an exciting game, but not only does it all just get executed poorly and never properly resolved, it almost still manages to feel boring. Boring. Time travel and multiple timelines ended up being boring. How? You have such a cool story and lore premise, yet managed to make an extremely linear game with slow and boring gameplay, barely any highlights or exciting moments, and no proper conclusion to anything. The ending is fucking awesome, but not because it feels like a good conclusion to the game's story, but because it's just a cool on its own way, especially for Dead by Daylight players. Like that one cool scene in a mediocre movie, or that one cool verse in that song that's otherwise not so good. One good part that works on its own, completely detached from the rest of the game, but can't salvage it either. Okay, I could probably come up with 20 more metaphors and explanations to my points, so let's conclude this review with some final sentences. The casting of Frank Stone is a game with an enjoyable cast of characters and an amazing, brutal killer. It got tons of fun Dead by Daylight Easter eggs and some of the franchise's best deaths, alongside a memorable ending, especially for fans of DBD. Unfortunately, it ends up being a slow, boring, and technical mess that outside of the final 20 minutes never manages to truly feel exciting or fun. Its badly paced story tries to do a lot, yet finds itself leaving a lot to be desired in a mix of unresolved questions and rushed writing. The game fails at replicating what made previous games in the franchise so special, from the story, to the gameplay, to the choices, to the atmosphere, and more. It's simply never able to reach the level of any of its predecessors, which is why I have to probably consider it my least favorite supermassive game to date. And that is honestly just sad. It's disappointing. We had so much potential, especially with the Dead by Daylight EP, yet did nothing memorable with it. And that is just sad, as a fan of supermassive games and DBD. I don't know if my expectations were too high. Maybe I'm also just completely wrong, because tons of people have called it already their favorite supermassive game to date. But I finished this game and now writing its review, and I simply have to consider it my least favorite title in the franchise. And that's something that I really didn't expect to be the case. But here we are, and this is it with this way too long review. As you probably noticed, my voice is unfortunately completely fucked up, so excuse how everything sounded throughout, but this is the best I could do at the moment and I didn't want to wait any longer. I would love to know your thoughts on this game, what you liked and disliked about it, and whether or not you agree with me or not. I will be doing a tier list video for all 7 supermassive games where we rank each game from best to worst across various tiers. Tune into that to see how the rest of the franchise looks for me. For now, I go back to Star Wars Outlaws, look forward to the new FIFA, and see you all with the Until Dawn remake in October. Thanks for watching, and see you soon.